Welcome to this webinar in the Financial Abuse Awareness series. My name is Bill Mitchell. This series is part of the Financial Protections Project, co-designed by the Queensland Government, Caxton Legal Centre and Townsville Community Law. The series is an online continuing professional development program that aims to raise financial industry awareness about the financial abuse of older persons. Before we begin, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. This presentation is number 2 in the Skills Module series, and it's about working with capacity issues. The slides are not read verbatim, but paraphrased for emphasis. They are designed to be standalone, readable modules and contain references for deeper learning. Let's begin. Before we begin this module, let's take a moment to think about this statement from De Balis. After you've read it, you need to think about yourself. How does your work or professional environment approach the issue of legal capacity? Does it conflate functional or mental capacity with the right to legal capacity? Working effectively with older persons often involves the impact of impaired decision-making capacity. Developing an appropriate approach to assessing capacity is fundamental to ensuring that appropriate action is taken. Many resources exist around assessing capacity, including screens, assessments, and tools. Individual advisors must ultimately make decisions about whether an older person has legal capacity to give instructions and take advice, and in the context of abuse, whether cognitive impairment may have already led to financial abuse. There are excellent resources that already exist to help in this regard. The learning outcomes are set in the box to the right. Many of the barriers faced by older persons with disabilities in exercising autonomy and capacity relate to the absence of appropriate support services. Where services exist, they often don't respect autonomy, nor do they promote the full and effective participation and inclusion. Legal capacity is the outward exercise of autonomy, and older persons are at a heightened risk of denial or restriction of their legal capacity. In Queensland, capacity can be assessed differently for different types of decisions. For example, the capacity to make a gift or enter a contract differs from decisions about medical treatment. An advisor's starting point is that an older person is presumed to have capacity. This relates to the Guardianship Act, Section 7. This means that older persons have the right to make legally effective decisions and act on those decisions. An older person's right to make decisions is fundamental to their inherent dignity, and the right to make decisions includes the right to make decisions with which others may not agree. The Act acknowledges that capacity may differ depending on the nature and extent of the impairment, the type of decision, and the support available. Most industry codes of ethics recognise the presumption of capacity sits alongside the reality of assessing client competence. You can see this in the Financial Counsellors Code of Ethics, which reinforces the right to autonomy, but they also need to be able to provide informed consent. Advisors need to understand that not every interaction calls for an assessment or questioning of capacity. It's important to clarify each time a person is supported to make a decision, this doesn't amount to the exercise of legal capacity, just as every action does not amount to an exercise of legal capacity. We need to think about the type, nature and extent of the decision to be made before any limitations to legal capacity should even be considered. Advisors need to have an understanding of how the law defines capacity, so when it arises, they recognise the relevance to legal process and the importance to individual autonomy. The approach to defining capacity depends on the decision to be made. A general approach can be found in the Guardianship and Administration Act, which defines capacity and impaired capacity. You can see the test there. If a decision-making capacity is in doubt, an advisor must take steps to assess and maximise capacity. These steps are adapted from the excellent Queensland Handbook for Practitioners on Legal Capacity. It shows the 5 steps that have to be taken into account. Identify the client. Identify the decision. Consider whether there's reason to question the capacity. Determine whether there already is a decision maker, and look at red flags or indicia of impaired capacity. You've got to take steps to maximise a client's capacity also, and this is a very important thing that people often aren't aware of. There are industry examples around working with capacity. The CPA Australia suggests members ought to be aware of the signs that a person may have impaired decision-making capacity and lists some of the issues there. The CPA provides specific details about assessing capacity at the link below. The first step is identifying the client. This is incredibly important because in most cases the client will be the older person seeking advice or assistance. There will be cases where a decision maker, such as an attorney or a guardian or a supporter, may seek to be the client with you. It's important to look at your professional and ethical obligations and ask yourself not only who is the client, but who seeks to be the client and whether they can be. In most cases, advisors can't and should not accept instructions from third parties or persons of influence such as family, friends and carers. There are limited opportunities for a third party to give you instructions. Secondly, identify the particular decision the client is seeking to make and the relevant legal test for capacity. For example, the Powers of Attorney Act at Section 41 requires a particular test be applied in the making of an enduring power of attorney. Thirdly, consider whether there is any reason to question the client's capacity. There are various red flags, and we'll run through some of those later, but advisors must be very cautious that other issues don't cloud their judgment, such as someone actually acting under undue influence, or someone with a limited education or with literacy skills, including things like financial literacy. Health issues can give rise to questions about whether capacity is an issue. Again, we need to be very careful that someone's circumstances don't mask or make us think they lack capacity when in fact they don't, and they have the ability to make decisions with support. Fourthly, we need to determine whether a decision maker has been formally appointed, and that should be easy. And you can see the industry example of the Financial Counsellor's Code of Ethics, and in some cases a representative might be involved. It's important to see a copy of any document or order that appoints a decision maker. If red flags or indicia of impaired capacity are present and no decision maker has been appointed, then you need to take steps to maximise and support the older person's capacity. And there's some tips there in the bullet points about how you do that. They go back to the same issues we talked about in skills with working with older persons, meeting with them alone, meeting with them in person, focusing on them as an individual, ensuring that the setting is conducive to their comfort, privacy and safety, and so on. Here are some indicia of impaired decision-making capacity. These things can, but do not necessarily indicate that an older person has impaired decision-making capacity. These are only red flags that should make you aware of the need to go looking further at the situation, including the need to support and maximise capacity. Take some time to read through those bullet points. If you decide that an older person is not competent to give you instructions, after trying to maximise and support their decision, you may not be able to take instructions from them to make a legal or financial decision. If you're in this situation, you should take advice about the options open to you and, of course, the options open to the older person that help promote their autonomy and independence. Before we leave, let's consider this extract from Barry. Thanks for listening to this webinar series. Feel free to download the PDF files for future reference. The next module is the third module in the skills series, and it's about detecting financial abuse. Thanks for joining us.